Hello everyone, this is update for January 5th, 2025, day 1047 of the war, end of the date update. Just gonna do very short, quick general strategic update, and then it's gonna be also very short and quick overview of the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. So first, I wanna mention this news that the cable between Taiwan and the US was cut off, apparently by Chinese forces. So the official story, this is actually why I wanted to mention this. The official story is that it's being cut off by, or damaged, whatever you call it, by a Chinese ship that's sailing, that has Cameroon registration. Most likely, and this is actually the same sort of story that we seen in Finland, between Estonia and Finland, where it was also damaged cable. Prior to that, I think it was Lithuania and Sweden. So basically, by outside the Baltic Sea, or now this is something very new. It's spreading to go to Asia Pacific, but in all those cases, for whatever reason, there is this civilian ships that are allegedly root causes for this damage. And in case of Finland, the Finnish special forces, they detained that ship and didn't find anything. And I think what's really happening is this civilian ships are basically sort of false flag distractions. And it's actually something else. Some other means are being used to damage these cables by both Russia and China. And it does appear that China is also was involved in the Baltic Sea. So, but going back to Asia Pacific, so this is something very new, and it's very clear escalation. And I would argue that this is initial sign that the hot phase of the conflict is probably approaching, or at least it's coming closer. It's not obviously a guarantee. It doesn't mean it's inevitable, but we one step closer in very clear way, and I would say in alarming way, because to do this is something you would do if you want to attack whatever country. You want to first thing you would like to do is to interrupt communication or destroy communication, and in this case, communication between Taiwan and the US is extremely critical, because and why it's important. These cables are important in while satellite communication and including even Starlink is a replacement, but not such a great replacement. It's a poor replacement for cable, because cable throughput capacity always better than air, because electrons are moving faster through metal, basically, and that's electromagnetic waves are moving faster through metal, and that's it's always going to be better mean of communication than the communications through airwaves. And obviously, this is also related to large throughput. So, as you can imagine, this this is important interruption, and I'm sure there are more cables, but this is sort of like a trial balloon to see what happens, how it works, if it works. So it's essentially, I think, China is sort of testing future actual hostilities, and this is just sort of training. It was essentially training there. Now I'm going to switch to situation in Ukraine or around Ukraine. And one thing I want to mention is Russia clearly indicated to the West that they don't want ceasefire. in Ukraine. And the same situation goes for Ukraine. Nobody wants to see, neither Ukraine nor Russia wants a ceasefire and sort of temporary peace, similar to what was going on from, say, I think it was 2015, I think from February of 2015 till February of actually 2022. So I think it was like 7 years. Simply because it doesn't work. It's not stable situation. It's basically powder keg that's going to explode in, I don't know, whatever, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 7 years. Probably in this case, it's going to explode sooner than 7 years, because Ukraine is going to be extremely weak and incapable, essentially, of self-defense, and it's going to be even more tempting target for Russia. And Russia's goal is actually move west out of Ukraine. So essentially, which again, it goes back to what Russia is indicating. They need all of the Ukraine. It's either Russia is going to control all of the Ukraine, or all of Ukraine will be neutral. Russia will not tolerate, let's say, Western control or Western influence in Ukraine, even if it's, we draw this line right now here where it's not going to work for Russia, because very simple answer is, from Russian perspective, I'm not saying this is right perspective, but you need to understand how the opposing party is looking at the situation. From Russia's perspective, all of this northeastern part of Ukraine is extremely close to Moscow and basically all important parts of Russia. So in some ways, this area in Zaporizhya, Crimea, Lugansk, Donetsk is not really place from which how Russia would protect itself. Russia really needs to control this northeastern part of Ukraine to have minimal protection, and really also including Zhytomyr region. So basically, all of this sort of that I'm showing, sort of like northeastern part, and then this kind of like center north of Ukraine as well. And I'm not saying that this is viable. Ukraine simply at that point, Ukraine is not completely not viable. So for this reason, Russia doesn't want to sort of have this ceasefire, because all it really means is that threat for Russia is there and they need to continue fighting. The same goes for Ukraine. Ukraine cannot sort of tolerate ceasefire just because it will not be able to continue fight, essentially, because it's in extremely weak situation right now. So and this explains why neither side wants to settle, even despite both sides are extremely exhausted. There is heavy losses, not the losses that being presented in the Western media or in Russian media or Russian military or Ukrainian military. They are overinflated losses. Definitely, each side sustained probably at least 200,000 dead. So that is for sure, and probably a couple times more of the wounded. At the same time, wounded, you have different sort of categories where it's light, medium, and essentially the ones like call it like heavy, where you cannot really continue anything. You essentially become incapable of taking care of yourself. So that is relatively small percentage. So we can really operate using this 200,000. Obviously, the number is growing by day, which are substantial numbers for both sides. It's not small numbers, but at the same time, the human resources are not fully exhausted, and in particular on the Russian side, they are far from exhausted. And the only thing in Russia is that Russia needs people also to sustain war machine, so for war economy. So it's not like Russia can throw everyone into the fight, because portion of Russian resources, human resources, is supporting economically war manufacturing. In Ukraine, it's easier because Ukraine doesn't really need as much people to support war economy, simply because Ukraine gets support from the West. So in some ways, West is providing the human resources that support war effort. So in some ways, it's somewhat like equalized a little bit in favor of Ukraine, because whatever percentage in Russia, they cannot dedicate at least half. Let's say we take half of population Russia, they cannot really dedicate to the actual fighting on the front line, simply because Russia, while it's getting some help from China and from North Korea, it cannot replace actually internal production in Russia, and it's not sufficient what they're getting from North Korea. Mostly, it's supplementary. So for us, so in some ways, the human resources are to extent equalized. Still, Russia is ahead of Ukraine, but the advantage is not so negative as it's being presented in the media. But surely Russia has advantage. There is no question about that. Now I'm gonna do a quick walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, starting from the north, and actually starting from Kursk region, where there are some changes there. So Ukrainian forces decided to, I don't know if it's attack, counterattack, whatever you call it, but it's done in terrible way. But Ukrainian forces basically pushed along this road towards Bolshoye Soldatskoye. Then some part of the group pivoted to capture village Berdin, to basically to secure flank, and part of it tried to move towards Bolshoye Soldatskoye. It wasn't big success at all. So it was, I would say, doesn't look promising at this point at all. At the same time, it may be just a probing attack, so it's absolutely unclear the sort of scope of this action. But again, and the end goal of this action also very unclear. So again, it does seem to be that this is another propaganda stunt that doesn't really help Ukraine by any means, that has no strategic goal, no strategic military goal, and just basically hitting into nowhere in emptiness, and just wasting resources, Ukrainian resources. So I'll sort of continue updating on this situation, but so far it was not very successful attempt, and it was done in very primitive way. It doesn't seem that Ukrainian forces learned anything from their attempt to attack Russian troops in Zaporizhya region in the summer of 2023. So the same primitive approach is being used. The only improvement is that Ukrainian forces had the better protection against the UAVs, that sort of call it wireless UAVs, and that helped. But however, Russian side is now actively using wired UAVs, for which there is no sort of protection. You need to shut them down. This is the only way to deal with those. And Ukraine does not have effective solution for that. So that really means that that Russia has effective tools to stop Ukrainian offensive. Well, I wouldn't even call it. It's because the way it's done, it's, as I mentioned many times before, it's a peasants' army attack. So cannot even really call offensive or even attack. It's drive of the mass of the people and equipment. That's probably the best description of what it is. Now let's jump to situation north and northeast of Kharkiv, where things completely quiet, nothing is happening here. The next location is Lugansk front line, in the specific North Lugansk front line. So things got somewhat worse for Ukrainian side. Russian troops managed to establish another bridgehead across this tiny stream called Zherebets, and they captured the village Ivanivka, which is where I'm showing. This is another bridgehead. At this point, it's in some ways it's meaningless in terms of Russian forces already established a bunch of bridgeheads, so this stream is not a problem for Russian troops. It's just another evidence of crumbling Ukrainian defenses. However, in this case, it gets sort of worse because Russian troops then can start moving towards Liman and essentially in the direction of Izum and cutting off all of this Ukrainian troops south of around Liman. So again, this is definitely a negative development, no question about it. And I would say not surprising given the whole situation with Ukrainian military command and political leadership. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. The northern sector is quiet, nothing really happening there on either side. The southern is the only active part is this fighting in Chasiv Yar, where again it's sort of push and pull in terms of Russian troops have accumulated enough resources, they attack, then they run out of the resources, it's just stalls, then they wait till get new resources and they continue attack. So basically Russian command does not have enough resources to make decisive moves in this area. And so far, Ukrainian forces were able to hold on to parts of Chasiv Yar, so basically fight for Chasiv Yar continues, and Russian advance for now stalled. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line, where things are really, I call it catastrophic. Maybe it's a little bit too early to call it catastrophic, but it's certainly going in that direction. So few updates here. Russian troops started moving in the northern direction here east of Myrolubivka. They captured one village, so basically they're advancing towards this road, which essentially this road is meaningless. The importance of this is that it seems that Russian command decided to do their favorite tactic, which is pincers. So they already have the southern one around Pokrovsk, and now they start building the northern one, and that's the whole point right now. So the goal is actually to get close enough to this road that goes north of Pokrovsk, which is main supply line, and also this road E50, which is was important and actually main supply line, but now it's being sort of becoming, soon it will become more affected because Russian troops close to Udachne and Kotlyne here. So this importance of this road will go dramatically down. So for Russian troops, really what they need is to advance enough towards north so they can also cut off, essentially severely restrict supplies through this road that goes north of Pokrovsk, which then will make it impossible long-term defense of Pokrovsk. So this is sort of very straightforward, typical tactic that's being used by Russian command like all the time, essentially. Then Russian troops are advancing here towards, actually that advance somewhat stalled. Let's actually look at the situation. So Russian troops are advanced relative to this map from 27th December. A little bit further, they are close to the road, but they still did not approach village Udachne and Kotlyne, meaning they're still not on outskirts of the both villages. They're still moving through these fields, and that's really the only meaningful advance of Russian troops over since the last video in this area. The situation sort of south around basically Kurakhove and Novelika Novosilka remains somewhat stable, driven mostly by Russian inactivity and I would say probably regrouping, accumulating resources for next move. Slowly but surely, the only update here is that Ukrainian forces slowly but surely losing this power plant. So there is fighting already going on there at the power plant, but at the same time that defense could last pretty long. It's really good defensive position. The problem is that as soon as Russian forces have enough resources to continue their drive towards Ulakli and then west from Shevchenko, then it's going to be impossible to hold on this area anyway. So this probably going to be lost relatively as soon as Russian army has enough resources to continue advance. But it does feel that Russian army is running low on resources, relatively speaking. But now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here quiet, nothing really meaningful going on here. And then let's finish with the front line along the Dnipro River, where things back to their quiet situation. Was mentioned probably like 2 weeks ago. There was a Russian attempt to establish bridgehead on the western bank of Dnipro River, but that failed. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye-bye.